Welcome to the Maritime 101, brought to you by the Maritime Business Chamber, supported by all its corporate members. Ports as essential instruments for sustaining and improving diverse growth in African economies webinar.
Ports are an essential part of the connection on international trade.
Port of Cape Town has proved crucial, especially with Algoa Bay bunkering zone on the Indian Ocean closed.
Without a port, large parts of the economy of the world would be stuck. Ports that thrive in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea are major trade routes and international supply chains. They are located in the oil and gas supply lines. Shanghai, what it does in 5 days, Dar es Salaam does in 1 year. What Shanghai does in 10 days, Mombasa does in 1 year.
Several others on the continent are developing their ports in a sustainable manner.
African ports have gained popularity over the years due to their very successful port management partnerships. These ports are responsible for a majority of the country's imports and exports. The ports of Africa are a legitimate business for the countries in which they are situated. They also have the added value of being tourist spots, who arrive in their thousands every other year in cruise ships.
We are all welcomed into today's session, which is the Maritime 101 session. In this session of today, which talks to ports as essential instruments for sustaining and improving diverse growth in Africa, in African economies webinar. In this session of today, we've got Ms. Nongaba Bengu, who is the Managing Director and the founder of Maritime Hub Network, who will be our moderator for this session today. And the guest of presenters, Colonel Andre Siso, whom is the Secretary General of PAMWESA, which is Ports Management Association East and Southern Africa. And we've got Mr. Elijah Mbaru, who is a maritime professional and also is current chairperson or the chairman of ICS in East Africa. And we've got Mr. Hariash Manade, whom is the founder of Shipping and Freight Resources. You are all welcomed into today's session. Before I hand over to Ms. Nongaba Bengu, I just want to take you through the purpose of today's session. Today's session highly would want to, address the issue of understanding that Africa's ports sector continues to attract private funding with about $15 billion that has already been invested between 2005 and 2019. But despite these numbers, the financial needs of the African continent remain significant, and smart investment remains the most effective solution for the long term to allow for the significant investment of the development of lasting regional continental hubs. Part of what we are going to be discussing in today's session, which would be moderated by Ms. Bengu, will dive into the challenges faced by the African ports, the role of the African ports, which that it can play to alleviate poverty in Africa. How can the African ports be integrated into global value chains? How can the African ports avoid stiff competition between neighboring countries and poor connectivity? How can the African ports end the vicious cycle of operational inefficiencies? Can the African ports, increase sizable investments on ports infrastructure with new technologies? And we believe that the panel of our experts would be able to guide us into the right direction as this African continent. My name is Unathi Sonti. I am the current serving executive chairperson of the Maritime Business Chamber, and I welcome you into today's session. I now wish to hand over to Ms. Nonqaba Bengu. Thank you.
Thank you, Unathi, and good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to our esteemed guests, speakers, and participants. As Unathi has mentioned, my name is Nonqaba, and I'm truly honored to welcome you again to today's webinar titled Ports as Essential Instruments for Sustaining and Improving Diverse Growth in African Economies. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Maritime Business Chamber for organizing and hosting this pivotal session. And in advance, thank you to our speakers for taking time out of your busy schedules to share your insights with us. And thank you to our participants and everyone who's joined and is listening. Before we dive into our session, I'll just give a brief introduction. It'll be very short. Have an academic background in economics and maritime, specifically in shipping and logistics. And professionally, I've worked in shipping, logistics, and port terminal operations, which has equipped me with the nuance of understanding the maritime sector and hoping to be a great moderator for the session. But before we dive in, I would like to just give some house rules and just to ensure that our webinar runs smoothly. Firstly, I don't think though we'll have a problem with regards to microphones. I think everybody is already muted. But to our participants and everybody listening today, please feel free to use our chat feature to submit any questions or comments to our speakers during the presentations. I'll just ensure that I'll keep checking the chat box, and hopefully we can also integrate those questions throughout our discussions. And if we are unable to get to any questions, we definitely will towards the end of the session. And also just for everybody to note, the webinar is recorded for future reference and educational purposes. And just how the webinar will unfold, I will give an opportunity for each speaker to briefly introduce themselves and then give us their unique perspective and insights on our central theme, which will contribute to us just having a foundational understanding of this topic. We will then transition into a moderated discussion guided by the questions formulated from the introductions. And also formulated from currently what's going on with regards to African ports and any emerging themes which may come up throughout this discussion. But again, to our participants, the segment is designed to engage our speakers, and they have diverse expertise and a great wealth of knowledge, so please do use the opportunity to ask questions. I'll now like to hand over to our speakers, Mr. Colonel Andre Siso, Mr. Harish Manadir, and Mr. Elijah Mbaru. Thank you.
Thank you. Like you rightly mentioned, I'm Colonel Andre Siso. I'm the Secretary General for the Port Management Association for Eastern and Southern Africa, which regroups countries from Sudan all the way southwest to Angola, the landing countries, English-speaking, and the islands in the Southwest Indian Ocean Basin, islands under the grouping of Indian Ocean Commission. They are all members of PAMESA, and we have a list of associate members, which are generally service providers to ports authorities. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Harish Manadir. I'm the founder of Shipping and Freight Resource. Shipping and Freight Resource is a resource that provides information about the markets and some insights into what is happening in the world of shipping, freight, logistics, supply chain, and trade. And it is also one of the foremost resources for educational information about the industry, right from a beginner stage to advanced level. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody, from wherever you are in the world. As I said previously, my name is Elijah Baru. I'm a maritime practitioner, and I'm also the current chairman of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, which essentially promotes commercial professionalism in the commercial shipping. On a professional background, I've worked for a long time in the shipping company. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you so much to our speakers. I'll just maybe start off then with a question which I think Unati had raised as one of the objectives, is that we see a lot of investments happening in African ports. However, for example, in Djibouti, the past few years, there's been investments of just over 4 billion, and yet we see that the state of the economy and the people in that country haven't really we don't see the benefits sort of trickling down to the people in the different African states. So just based on that, what and any other challenges you may come across, but based on that, what can we do? What strategies can we put in place to ensure that whatever investments we are putting into our ports, whether it's through infrastructure, that we're able to then see that in regards to not just their economies, but also making a difference to the people in each of those countries in Africa?
If you permit me to start, Djibouti is one of the members of PAMESA, and we know that most of the hubs in Africa, hub ports, are located geographically in the corners of Africa, and Djibouti is one of them. Durban, and then in the west you have also Morocco and maybe the port in Nigeria. But at the same time, most of the investments in hard infrastructures when it comes to port development is with the objective to become a hub port. And we all know that most of the investment, the funding comes from outside the continent. And very rare you hear the financial institutions from within the continent financing this kind of project. So this comes with serious conditions like, let's say, happened in one of the countries in Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka in particular. So the funding issue with the conditions and the socio impact analysis, sometimes they don't study it properly because the issue is to be a hub and compete without analyzing the potential risks and the competitions. The issue of competitions is the one that is destroying the opportunity of the ports of Africa to evaluate because there's stiff competition instead of collaboration. Therefore, as the country performs poorly, definitely it will cascade down even to the society. So this is the main challenges that we face. And I believe we will continue to see such if the idea of collaborating are not developed properly and promptly. Thank you.
Thank you. If you may allow, please, me, moderator.
Yes, you may continue.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks again to the speakers and the participants. I think Colonel has wrapped it so well that most of these developments that are done are not from within the region. They are actually foreign funded. But my take would be a little different. Like in the situation of Djibouti, we saw what happened between Djibouti and DPY. I think the government, the African governments need to do a lot of due diligence because before such huge investments are undertaken, in terms of they must understand the contractual terms and what the government will benefit. Because you know better than me that any town, a port city, all over the world has overgrown other cities in that country. So the cascading effects of what happens in the port, which is just a node for a commercial growth of a country, should be felt to the roots or to the villages of that country. So for me, it's very simple that the government must put policies, must do due diligence to ensure that they are entering into something that they know that will be beneficial to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Manadir, do you have any comments on that?
While I agree with what the other two speakers have said, the other key message or key point is also, apart from the investments, you also asked about the economic development and growth, how the ports can bring that out. If you look at, or if you're looking at Djibouti specifically, Djibouti is a gateway port to a few countries around it, mainly, for example, Ethiopia. And a lot of the traffic that flows through Djibouti is impacted by what happens in Ethiopia. And a lot of the current issues surrounding Ethiopia and the economic turbulence is also a key factor in the growth of any port, because Djibouti obviously is a very small port and very small country, but depends largely on other countries like Ethiopia and Somalia and Sudan to also support them. So this also plays a major role in the development of that port and the country and the infrastructure and the people in that country. That is my take also on that.
Okay, thank you. And just with regards to obviously, I think that what was mentioned was that government needs to have proper policies in place. Now, we know we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement currently in place. What role can that play maybe at a regional level to ensure that we have that collaboration rather than competition?
I believe this should be starting from the political level. There's the key, starting from the political leadership, the political will of countries to understand that not all of us can become a hub. And the risk is so high. And when we approach private sector companies, for example, to bring efficiency to our ports, maybe we as Africans who knows the continent well, we don't have the strength when it comes to bringing out the issues, the challenges, the risks, to give confidence to the politicians on the continent that we can do it from an African perspective, whilst we know that we have to trade with other parties from outside. But the role of the AFCFTA, for example, is to boost intra-Africa trade. To boost intra-Africa trade, we need to have the transports, for example, the multimodal transport properly developed. This will include the rail, the road, because we are still some countries driving on the left, some on the right. The gauge used by the train to interconnect the continent is still an issue, and we don't have our own African maritime cabotage, for example, to move goods from the same coast, point A to point B. For example, from Mombasa to Lamu Port, we are still relying on foreign vessels. Therefore, we need to look at how we can develop intra-Africa trade together with the types of infrastructure that we have, who will switch left or who will switch right, or how do we modify the gauge so that we can boost intra-Africa trade. Otherwise, the challenge will remain with us for a very long time to come. Our capacity to negotiate good deal, our understanding of the society, and when there's political changes, there must be continuity. These are major challenges that prevent us from achieving what you are saying. Thank you.
Mr. Mbaru or Mr. Manadir?
Thank you so much. I think Colonel has said it again very well, and my take would be we need to supplement each other as countries, that is, as ports. What, for example, Mombasa lacks and Dar es Salaam is good at, we should be able to complement each other. Because you see, to become a hub and spoke, it just doesn't come. Like, for example, look at our instance here in Kenya. We have a port in Lamu that can easily be used by the Lapset corridor, can easily be used by Ethiopia, South Sudan, and by extension, some of the countries in Central Africa. But the thing is a white elephant. It's lying there with massive potential and natural harbor. So we need to complement each other and look at what we lack. Even if a country is landlocked, we must look at how we can interconnect amongst ourselves, regardless of the economy of that country or how huge they are. I think that is my message. We need to collaborate and supplement each other.
I agree as well. In Africa, almost the entire continent, the key issue is the hinterland connectivity. That is the main problem, where it leads to lots of delays at the borders, and even the smallest issue of documentation becomes a problem, and then trucks are standing for days or sometimes months at the borders. It's the AFCFTA is hoping to bring all this to a close and enable the signatories, which is all the countries and signatories, almost 54 countries, to collaborate between themselves and provide this interconnectivity. As much as the countries that operate ports have to also step up, the main focus also should come from the countries that are landlocked, so they can provide infrastructure support to the port countries and provide their own means of transportation, whether it is rail or road, whichever way it is, to supplement the efforts of the port countries, so that we work hand in hand. So the port countries handle the port side, and the landlocked countries can handle the land side activities much better than it is currently happening. And with the involvement of several countries now, Rwanda has started, Kenya has started, Ghana, Guinea, South Africa, all have started working with the AFCFTA. We're hoping that the momentum will carry on, and many more countries will take part in making this trade happen, intra-Africa trade happen.
Thank you very much. Colonel mentioned that we need to really boost intra-Africa trade. And I think trade is very important in this aspect because, as we know, shipping and I think even ports have a sort of a derived demand from trade. And a lot of the products that we see being exported from Africa are natural resources rather than manufactured goods. What role can ports play to create that value for our exports? Like, how can we use the ports to change or diversify the products that we export in order to create value creation?
I think the starting point for this would be the governments, where they need to enable more manufacturing and production in African countries. Like you rightly mentioned, majority of the goods that are shipped out are natural resources and commodities, whereas some of the products can be developed within Africa itself, bearing in mind that the resources are coming from here. So we're taking the resources from Africa, sending it outside of Africa, manufacturing it, converting it into something, bringing it back into Africa and assembling here. For example, if you think of car parts, there are automotive parts, there are several automotive parts that are being received as imports using the materials that we exported from here. So unless that changes, ports by itself cannot do much in this aspect because they don't control what is being exported. Of course, they can enable it further in terms of efficiencies, but I don't see a role for ports specifically in converting this this model from resources to manufacturing, because they don't have any direct control over it. They can enable it, no doubt, yes. And maybe if it is possible, they could give some incentives for manufactured goods. That is something that some ports might be able to think. But when it comes to containerized shipment, it's the cost per unit, not what is inside the unit, that will affect the ports tariffs and systems. So for this, it must start at the government level, as some other things as well. But this definitely must start at the governmental level.
Okay.
I ran out of power and I've just been reconnected. So please go ahead, and then I'll intervene on this subject.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Mr. Madej has explained it very well. And I was also going to go on that line that the governments need to build a very strong economy on oil sectors first. Before they start thinking about manufacturing, they have to build a very strong economy. For example, to strengthen those countries who are strong in tourism, in agriculture, they have to build that. Because if you look at it, and it's a shame that most of the African countries in the yesteryear, say in the 80s, they used to do, like, for example, a local assemblance of vehicles. And all those things, the paradigm shift has changed. And the majority of those things now are being done either in China or somewhere else in the Asian countries. So the bottom line is that the governments need to build very strong economy and good governance for that matter, so that the foreign exchange also can be very strong in that regard. I think that's my take. Thank you.
If I may, I believe there's a lot that the continent can do when it comes to starting to add value from the continent itself. And we see, for example, in Mombasa, the government had allocated several hundred square kilometers of land to attract private investors to start developing, doing value added, for example, closer to the port area to reduce the cost. And it is just next to the port, and it will facilitate moving of the goods, let's say from the raw material from inland, value add it near the port, and then make it easier and less costly for export. We have some countries that have put in place policies, like, for example, those countries exporting timber, like Uganda, Tanzania, that they will start to process the timber there in the country to maybe add some values there and export it sort of semi-finished. But I still believe that there's lots of capacity on the continent to be able to add values to several types of raw materials that we are today exporting in bulk, that can create jobs and generate additional revenue for the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to a question in the chat from Jacob Nare. It says, cargo access from inland mines to ports is critical for the success of the region. How best can Africa deal with cross-border issues and rail operation collaborations among countries and their ports?
I will go into that. And that's a very good question. I think it was also brought up by one of the speakers. I think we need to develop a very strong maritime policy amongst ourselves, and we need to shade our ambitions and accommodate, like I said before, accommodate those lesser and those weak, and come to a common ground that we have a very strong maritime policy that doesn't only deal with the sea-based issue, but also shore-based, the hinterland connection. I think that will unlock this. If we have a very strong maritime policy that brings us, all of us, together.
And if I may give example, for example, the goods coming from Djibouti to Ethiopia. It is checked at the port of arrival, and then finally at the final destination. This border crossing, they find a way to make it easier, because it is the continent trading with the outside countries. Therefore, I know there's lots of barriers at the border crossing, but there's lots of effort to improve it. I still believe that being African countries and with the intra-Africa trade strategy of AFCFTA, these barriers should be relooked and promptly facilitate people to trade across the border. But I see there's lots of political will now, more than before, to make it happen. I think it is happening, but it's not fast enough. So this is where there's that political work that needs to be done to facilitate, to modernize the border control posts to ensure that we can trade effectively. Thank you.
Would you like to add anything, Mr. Harish Manada?
It also depends on which ports or which part of Africa we're speaking about, because there are certain mature markets like South Africa where products are moved fairly well compared to some other ports and areas in Africa. Of course, we need to see where the bottlenecks are. If you're moving from Zambia, sometimes might cross two borders, and then you have to see where the issues are, which part of the borders the issues are, whether it is Zambia or Zimbabwe or South Africa, or even if you move directly. So yes, it is the cargo access to from the mines and inland mines to ports is very critical, but this has to be specified in terms of the area, and also specific cooperation agreements between the rail networks or road networks between the governments has to happen. We've seen issues in terms of rail movement between South Africa and Mozambique, for example. There has been some friction there affecting movement of goods. So like that, there are several other areas which are affected, of course. But it's the governments that need to enter into those agreements and make sure that the movement is seamless, because it is very important.
Thank you. And then let's move on to the topic of human capacity development. How can African ports address the shortage of qualified maritime economists and improve maritime training institutions to equip graduates with the necessary skills for the industry? Because as you mentioned, there needs to be more political will, but with that political will, they obviously need to be advised by people that have the knowledge and are able to do so.
If I can start, as usual, I believe that we have sufficient intelligent people and hardworking people on the continent that can lead and develop the maritime industry of our nation. We need to have good university in Africa. We need to pull in and collaborate the resources. Even at the maritime school level, we have competitions. Can you imagine? I believe we should look at it at regional level and also at the continental level, whereby we can train highly competent people to be our negotiators, our lawyers, our economists, our strategists, our socio-strategists, so that we can have sufficient capacity to negotiate as the continent and not be allowed to be taken into small parties, and then they come bulldozers, take over our wealth, take control of our resources, our infrastructure, sort of neo-colonialism approach, if I can use this word, if you permit. But we need to try and come up with strategies that African can negotiate at a better term and benefit more, whether we work with private investors from outside or from inside, but the country must benefit the maximum. The society must also receive the benefits generated by our gateway to economies like ports and airports. I believe if we can fly aeroplane, we can do everything. We can still negotiate also to get best deal of whom we partner with to do business. So there's a need to work in collaboration to develop the topmost university for the continent, to develop capacity of our mariners and logistic professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. My take is, I think as a continent, we have intelligent, able-bodied, able-minded people. And I think we need to lobby at a very high level because in most instances than not, we see that even our training institutions, the Maritime and Education Training Institute, the METS institution that exists in Africa, say, for example, the Arab Academy in Egypt, the Regional Maritime University in Ghana, you will find that we will have our graduates graduating from those schools. But we are told when they want to go and search for jobs in the international vessels, they are told that the certificates are not recognized. And you wonder, the schooling is the same. So we need to lobby at a very high level, I mean at maybe presidential level, and make sure that what is good for Uganda, what is good for Goose is good for Uganda, and make sure that our universities are recognized and our people, the pool of people that we produce from those universities, can be accepted without being subjected to further education or further scrutiny with the certificates that they will leave with from those universities. So we need to lobby at a very high level, and that is my take.
Yes, if what Elijah is saying is true, that is also a very important issue, because there cannot be any discrimination if the curriculum or the subjects or the studies are the same. But to add another point is also, my personal view is there is not enough awareness within our system, within the governments, within the various countries about the impact and the potential of maritime in this space. I mean, we are more or less an invisible industry doing things in the background. And there's not enough awareness created about the impact of what we do in people's life, in customers' life. So we need to create that awareness, and also how it can benefit companies, I mean, individuals in generating developing their careers. But on the other hand, we also need to ramp up enough volumes, and that is one way of creating that that awareness. That, for example, if there are more than at least one or two top ports in the world's top 10 or in the world's top 20 even, or even in the world's top 50 that belongs to the African continent, there will be a lot more awareness about what is happening in this space, and that will lead to further institutions taking up the education and development of this curriculum.
Thank you very much. I think that's really true, because you'll find that maritime only really becomes a topic of discussion when there's a major event in the world, such as COVID or currently what's happening in the Red Sea. So I think that awareness is definitely important. And then just going back to the chat, there was a question regarding climate change. And I also do have a question in line with that. In light of growing environmental concerns and the global push towards reducing carbon footprints, what innovative strategies and technologies can African ports implement to reduce emissions and promote environmental sustainability while still ensuring operational efficiency and competitiveness on a global stage? And also, just to add to that, how will that change the future development of African ports and their infrastructure?
The answer lies in the continent itself. I mean, the African continent has been blessed with so much of natural resources, whether it is commodities or whether it is the sun or the wind or water. There's so much of natural resources available to the continent to use in generating various green technologies, or even to convert ports to a green port I mean, we have a few airports in the continent which are run entirely on solar power, for example. There's nothing stopping us or the governments or the port authorities to invest in solar and wind power to assist with port operations and reduce the dependencies on fossil fuels. So that is one of the ways in which it can be done. Or we could offer, say, for example, reduced tariffs for ships running on green energy or environmentally friendly ships. So that is also ways in which the continent can reduce its carbon footprint and take part or be part of this climate change initiatives, which are really important and which has been really noticeable in many events that are happening across the world. So I think that is where ports can really add their muscle or add value to it.
If I may add on to that, I believe we have seen the challenges faced by many ports, especially the islands, where now more than ever, you see the high tide covering even the quay or the coastal area, which makes it very difficult for operations to be carried out. Another example is like Mauritius during the cyclone. The ports are paralyzed completely, and it's a big challenge for them now to manage immediately after the cyclone to put everything back to order so that they can continue to operate and get the port to function to bring in the goods needed for the country or the export. So, but there's lots of very good examples by many ports right now who is trying to be green, and PAMESA is pushing very hard with the support of UNEP, Nairobi Convention, to develop the toolkit and get the members to start implementing the toolkit to help a lot. But the key is strong collaboration, where when one port cannot operate, at least the other port can operate to ensure that there's no problems of backlogs of movement of goods, because we can plan the cyclone period, or we know that during the rainy season, there's a danger for this particular port not to be fully functional, and we move to the other. Therefore, the strong collaboration can help to alleviate a bit the situation for operations, but otherwise climate change is for real. We need to find long-term solutions, but there's lots of efforts in that direction, I can say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe I wanted to open a discussion that is open. And maybe the point number one, the person who asked that question, they should ask, is it Africa that brings about this climate change, carbon emission? Who is the culprit? I don't think it's Africa, but he is the culprit. But we bear the brunt of it, and we expect it to spend a lot in that end. So my takes would be that the biggest culprit should actually bear the costs of the damages that they have done over time to bring upon this. Because looking at it, we are seeing that even those that they are thinking, even those things that they are thinking, like for example, like the electric cars, it has been proven that they cannot be sustainable. They are getting fire on board. They are causing accidents. So it's a very delicate and vague issue to be discussed. I think that is what I can say.
Okay, thank you. We just have some questions on the chat, so I'll move on to that question. There's one that says, what level of increasing our port's capacity has an impact on enhancing economies? So what level of increasing our port capacity will that have a direct impact on enhancing our economies, and how much? I think that's the question that's being asked.
Maybe I'll take that. I think point number one, I should not say what level of expanding our port capacity. I would say how efficient, what level of efficiency can the port be to see direct effects on the economy, because we are told, and it's factual, you can check, that 10% of inefficiency at the port and the whole logistics chains and supply raises the cost of goods and services at the shelf by 20%. So I think the question will be, how efficient can ports be? And I think that will be to the international standard. I don't think there is a measure to that. I think it can be at its best and adapt the modern ways of operating and the modern systems of working, both documentation and the act. Thank you.
I believe when it comes to efficiency, we should look at it also in an integrated manner. We have example in the eastern part of Africa, whereby there's no sufficient parking space inside the port, for example, for the land side movement of goods. When there's that blockage inside the port, those trucks will backtail into the main traffic in the city because of the proximity of the city and the port. So the seaside also, we know that there's always some delays and long waiting time, or alongside also vessels wait a long time for movement. But we should look at it in an integrated manner, because the cause of a traffic jam in a city next to the port is not helping to develop the economy. These are seen in a number of countries which the ports are close to the city. But most of the time, even if you move the port somewhere else in isolated areas, after a few more years, you will see that the city is moving there as well. Therefore, there's a need to relook at the integrated development in such a way that with the ports and the cities work in close collaboration with each other to be able to ensure that the efficiency of the port also create benefits for the cities, whereby the two partners work efficiently together to ensure that the economic impact is well cared for and create the benefits for the society. Because a traffic jam costs the country a lot of money, and you can benefit from the port side, but you lose it in paying for fuel that thousands of vehicles in the cities are not reaching anywhere. Thank you.
Mr. Harish, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the question is more on if there is going to be an impact in enhancing economies if we increase the port capacity. I like to answer it in a different way. For example, if you look at the African continent, it is the richest in the world in terms of natural resources, but it's also the poorest in terms of GDP. So unless the GDP increases, we cannot increase port capacity. Unless the exports or imports increases, unless the volumes of traffic increases, there is no option to increase the port capacity, because what are we going to do with it? If there is not just a question of increasing the port capacity. So I think it is a tricky question as well, because one is dependent on the other. But if the port capacity increases on the back of an increasing GDP or exports or imports, then definitely there is going to be a big impact on the economies in Africa. We can't quantify that at this stage, though.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nati, you can come in.
Seem to be muted. Oh,
we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. No, I just wanted to bring to your attention that there is also another question that it came before that one, which then talks to, it says, private port terminal seems to be more efficient than government-owned port operations. It says here, should South Africa encourage more privatization in port operations or focus on capacity and training within government-owned port operations entities? And there is also another one, which here it says we are talking about marine. Is there anyone representing Transnet as a stakeholder? Are they part of this group here in South Africa? And then the last one is cargo access from inland mines to ports is critical for the success of the region. How can best Africa deal with cross-border issues and rail operations collaborations among countries. Thank you.
I think maybe we can start with the question regarding the privatization of ports, if we should focus on increasing that, or it says, or focus on capacity and training within government-owned port operation entities.
If I may take that one, I believe it depends on the characteristics of the ports also. Because if, let's say, you want to develop efficiently, being a very important hub in the region, maybe partially you can maybe bring in private sector initiative to increase efficiency. But at the same time, for smaller ports, it may be a challenge, because if you have only one operator and suddenly something go wrong and there's some disagreement, the risk of the ports being paralyzed is very high. At the same time, I still believe that we have able people that can be trained to improve efficiency, because a private company may come in with about 5-6 people, bring in a few machines, which also the many countries in Africa can invest in these machines. We can develop the capacity of our own people and give them the plan and the target that they should reach. And if they perform, definitely the benefit will be equally as if you were having a private sector. I think the attitude of saying that a government port is not efficient because it's government is not something that we should continue to live with, but we need to train our people to perform to the expectation on par with other competitors in the region or outside the region. I think people has got capacity. It's just a matter of getting them to perform to the standard expected. Thank you.
Privatization could work, but it need not be the only answer. I mean, an effective way would be to start a private-public partnership, which has worked in other areas as well. And yes, definitely it can work, but also, I mean, the government needs to, again, make sure that it is able to control these aspects of the privatization and of the contracts and way it is structured. And yes, to the Colonel's point as well, there is capability and there is capacity, but a lot of countries, what we have seen in Africa, is lacking in political will to push this through and make it successful. If there is enough government and political will to make this happen, then yes, it could be successful with or without privatization. But privatization is certainly an option that should be explored, because a lot of the countries, it has been run publicly for many years, and we've not seen much improvement. So maybe it is an option to try out, at least. That's my version.
Thank you. I think privatization, yes, but at what cost? For example, let us look at the port of Djibouti. We all know it was under DP1, and we saw the direction that it took. Look at in Tanzania, TICS, the same. So my take would be, I think there's a need of a change in the work culture, and like Mr. Mandar said, private-public partnership, but in a proper manner, well structured, that the government of the day of that country knows what they are entering into. But I don't think 100% privatization is the answer.
Okay, thank you. And we also had another question from Julia. I think this is for the Colonel. And basically the question is asking, is PEMESA, as a long-established entity, started to lobby the AFCTA leaders and task teams to ensure that the policies that are enforced are promoted? I think this is what
last year we had a meeting which PEMESA were actively participating in Togo, and it was organized by AFCFTA. And we raised so many challenges, including what we've discussed earlier, that need to be relooked at and agreed on how. For example, there's the standard gauge railway and the meter gauge railway. There's some countries that need to trade with others, that the track started on the left and have to switch on the right across the border. Now, this creates lots of challenges maybe for the drivers. And there are so many of such challenges that we need to relook at to be able to harmonize when it comes to policy. Who will follow who? Who will say, yes, it is possible, or who will prevent it from making it happen? These are the challenges that AFCFTA need to come up with and put it on the table for everybody to say that this is the way we want to do it. Otherwise, we'll go and come back, talk about it all throughout, but nothing will change, or not much will change for that matter. But I see that we are talking about it, which means that there's good intention, but it's a long journey. So we can speed it up if there's will at all levels. Thank you.
Okay, and then with regards back to just going back to we're talking about the inefficiencies that we see at the port and the impacts that has and the trailing impacts that has. Despite we mentioned improving infrastructure and improving hinterland connectivity, what other solutions can be put in place to deal with the inefficiencies that we do experience in African ports?
I believe there's a need to set good plan, good target, and train capable people to run the port and to perform with good guidance and benchmarking on progress. The challenge that we face most of the time, as soon as there's a government change in a particular country, they start to wipe out the leadership. And some countries does not have the luxury of having so many capable leaders in such domain. Therefore, occasionally moving people destroy continuity. But some ports, of course, they perform well. And if others can perform, why is it that those lagging behind cannot? I think this laissez-faire attitude or corruptions in certain ports need to be relooked at and get the team of good leaders to lead. Because Africans can lead, African can perform. We need to wipe out a few bad habits, and then we will see performance. And then if a winning team is there, I don't think when there's a change of government, we should temper with the winning team. Instead, we should boost their capacity because they are performing, they are showing results. We should enhance their capacity to deliver professionally and not through this different attitude of he's not one of us, you know. This is destroying progress in Africa, not only in the port world, but also in other sectors of the parastatals mostly. Thank you.
Mr. Manadia?
It's obviously common knowledge that the efficiency in African ports is severely constrained because of overburdened infrastructure and insufficient infrastructure because most of the ports are not planned for the growth or the development of trade within Africa. But the immediate way to address this would be to identify what are the key bottlenecks in the movement of goods. A lot of people complain about road networks and rail networks, but it is also intrinsically connected to the port because what happens in the ports affects what happens outside. If the ports are not suitably performing or efficiently performing, it backs up everything inland. The trucks coming in or going out are affected. Trains coming in or going out is affected. So one of the things that needs to be done is to look at the core reasons why the ports are not performing, and maybe it could involve reassessing and redesigning some of the port layouts and maximize space utilization. Look at efficient handling equipment, because a lot of the times breakdown in handling equipment puts a big bottleneck in the port operations. So these are some of the areas where that needs to be looked at in the near future to see how these can be alleviated, which will then alleviate the issues landside, which will then lead to more movement of goods and help with port operations as well.
Mr. Elijah, would you like to add anything?
I think no. I think all have been said. I will not add anything on that.
Okay, and I'd like to move on. Earlier, we did mention what's currently happening in the Red Sea. And with the resurgence of attacks on merchant vessels in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea crossing, what measures do you suggest to ensure the security of maritime routes and safeguard of the economic interests of African countries reliant on these routes? And why I've asked this question is I read a couple of days ago an article about, with these attacks, people were now looking to target the Indian Ocean with these attacks. So what measures do you suggest we can put in place?
Collaboration is key here, because without collaboration, these activities cannot be stopped. Each country that is dealing with, I mean, we already know the hotspots. We know the West Coast has got some hotspots. The East Coast of Africa has some hotspots. The Indian Ocean, Red Sea now, and also in Malacca Straits used to be also notorious. So there is enough information and evidence, and at this precise moment, there is enough naval presence of many countries in the Indian Ocean, in the Red Sea areas. Indian Navy recently, last week, rescued a ship that has been hijacked by Somali pirates after a very long time and rescued all the crew members. So there is enough presence of global and regional naval navies in these regions. Plus, the governments already have enough information. So it all boils down to how these countries can collaborate with each other and pass on information, and also possibly increase some of the or adopt some of the technological advances that has happened in this, because there's a lot of visibility software that is there that can provide visibility to where the ships are, what the movements are, how it is moving. All that information is available. It all depends on how much of data is being willing to be shared and is being shared between these countries and these regional hotspots, which can greatly, help in countering these activities. That's my view.
Yeah, if I may permit, if I'm permitted to say that, in fact, the Indian Ocean region side is very well covered. The lacks is maybe sufficient maritime resources to deploy or to intervene before action happened, because I think that after the piracy of the few years back had died down, maybe we were not on time to start before they started to deploy and started to create problems. But I'm sure that now we will see different ways of approaching it, because the intelligence collection network is very well organized in the region that covers all the way from the North Somalia, east of Seychelles, and towards the south. And this had been effective to combat the drug trafficking of the recent times. And therefore, I'm sure now they will engage. But like my colleague pointed out, it's very important to collaborate, because not all the countries in the region has got the maritime asset to be deployed.
I think I wanted to add
sorry, Mr. Elijah. I think Mr. Colonel wasn't finished. I think we just lost him for a moment.
Yeah, but I'm saying that if we pull our little bit of naval resources also to give support to the initiatives and support from bigger nations, we can do a better job in protecting our maritime sea line of communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Mr. Laji, you can come in.
Thank you, and sorry. I just wanted to say that we need to be genuine with what we are doing. For example, the recent bunker that had been hijacked in the Somali coast. And I posted, I'm in a group where we posted it, and somebody asked a question. Somebody from Somali desert. How come it's the same ship owners that are being hijacked? So I tended to believe, is it a collaborated, a pre-planned thing? So we need also to share a critical data information. And I think all the other things have been said by the speakers who are here, that the combating pirates of today is not what it was a decade ago. Technology has advanced, and we have got military presence, especially with this thing of the Red Sea that is going on. I think that is what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. And I think probably the key word for today is collaboration. I just wanted to pose a question to our speakers. What strategies can African ports put into place to collaborate, share knowledge, and also share skills between one another? And if there are any success stories, please do share.
Africans, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa 50 years ago created 3 associations, PAMESA, PAMWACA, and UAPNA. And all these 3 are regrouped under the Pan-African Port Corporations. So we have the mechanism, but what the challenge is that either these associations, our associations, are not performing to the expectations of the members, or the members are not participating actively. It comes back to the issue of collaboration and support, because these associations survive on subscription fee of members. If there's economic challenges in a particular country, they tend to need their responsibility in these associations where we sit together to discuss issues of concern and exchange best practices and knowledge to ensure that we all, big ports, small ports, evaluate on par with each other and support each other during difficult times. So, but what I've seen recently after COVID, I see more positive energies by our members coming back to be more active, because they see the value and benefits of sitting around the same table to discuss issues of concerns. And you hear the colleagues from the other side of the table saying, we can support you on this initiative. We have a list of private sectors that are associated with these associations that provide services to ports. Therefore, collaboration is the key, that we need to enhance collaboration and work together, discharge our responsibility towards our members, and know what they expect from us. And this will reflect through our strategic plan 2024-2027 to ensure that members see that you are in it, but you need to be active. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think Colonel has wrapped it so well there. I just wanted to mention that these things have been in existence, not only as a port. We had regional bodies, like, for example, the East African Community, which collapsed, and it was just brought up recently. We've got SADC, we've got ECOWAS. And I think the way to go, and I think those of you who have been attending these meetings are aware of it. Like, for example, now we have the ongoing formulation and drawing of the maritime transport policy that will ease the way the African countries do business, the way they relate to each other, not only those that have got seaports, but even those that are landlocked. And the other thing that we can do is to borrow best practices from our neighbors, from our colleagues. Like, for example, we can borrow some of the practices that Ethiopia does with their cargo. Being a landlocked country, they're still able to control their cargo, and that is a huge foreign earning for that country. And of course, the last one, we can be doing exchange programs amongst ourselves, ports. I think that is a very good thing to exchange knowledge and to learn where we lack and where we advance. I think that is my take. Thank you.
Mr. Manadir,
yeah. I think there are some, I wouldn't call this as a perfect example, but if you look at this could be considered more because they don't have a choice. But even otherwise, the collaboration between Djibouti and Ethiopia has been quite good for both sides. And for a period, the volumes were growing, but it was obviously linked to the growth of the Ethiopian economy. But if you consider the Ethiopian inland ports and working with Djibouti and their collaboration and cooperation, that has been quite good. But apart from that, one of the things that ports can do to collaborate is to create some sort of, as I mentioned previously, the inland points or inland ports can collaborate further with the seaports or the coastal ports in some joint infrastructure projects, creating road links or rail links that can connect the movement of goods seamlessly, and also possibly reduce some regulatory requirements, which sometimes impacts the movement of goods, especially across borders on road movements. So some of those models can work very well between countries, especially that share borders, and I think that is quite important, especially when you move resources and commodities in bulk volumes across many borders. So, for example, Zambia to South Africa, there's a lot of resources moving, but it could be made simpler. That's my view.
Okay, thank you. And with regards to innovation and technology, I know sometimes with the amount of unemployment that we have in the region, a lot of people don't like to hear the word innovation and technology because they maybe think that it will result in job losses. But what specific innovations or technology advancements do you believe will have the most significant impact on improving port operations and port efficiencies in Africa?
One of the main issues in Africa has always been, at least from the past, I know when I was working in Dubai and other countries, they say cargo gets lost very quickly in Africa, and that has been one of the main issues. And in terms of that, there are several technologies like IoT devices and smart containers and cargo trackers that can help with achieving this visibility. And this can be achieved wherever in the world you are. You can track your cargo till the last mile where it is. And this also could include port. So for customers that are in Africa or outside Africa, they can track their cargoes very efficiently with these kind of technological advancements. And it's also a lot of cases people are rightfully scared, but what I say is also technology like artificial intelligence is not going to take your job, but people or companies that use artificial intelligence can take your job. So it's a question of who's going to adopt it and how much and where it is being adopted. Ports especially can adopt it because it can provide that as a value-added service to their customers, rather than waiting for customers to contact them, or in most cases, not receiving information on time from ports, whether the cargo has been shipped, whether the ship has sailed, whether the container is offloaded, what is the status. So there are several technologies that the port can incorporate into its offering to their customers, which will help a great deal in its operations.
Thank you. Colonel Andre?
Yeah, in the last 30 years, we've seen lots of investment in hard infrastructure in Africa, maybe a bit less in soft infrastructure, that is the modern technology, to improve efficiency. What is important to say also, is that technology is here to stay, to evaluate, and in some cases, of course, like my colleague said, it helps bring efficiency, which had proven itself during COVID, for example. But at the same time, whilst we invest in capacity building and development of technology to improve efficiency, the social impact analysis on the community is very important to be studied, and then see how best we can create jobs, because like you rightly pointed out, technology scares so many people. Recently, we visited the inland container depot in Nairobi, and one colleague asked, what's about modernizing all these cranes there in the yard to be able to operate automatically? And the guy who was taking us around quickly said that if we do that, we can easily do it. It will take us 1 week to do it, but 40 crane operators will be out of job. What will happen to the family, because these people have been working for so many years operating crane in our ports? So do we abandon them because of modern technology, or we hold on for a while until we can integrate them somewhere? It's a bit of a tricky situation, but technology is rapidly coming into the country to help improve on so many deficiencies that we've been facing, including corruptions, delays, loss of cargoes, like was rightly pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elijah. Yes, you can come.
Thank you so much. I think I'm a believer of change. It's the only thing that is constant. And if we look at real life example, like for example, if we look at the Mombasa port, a decade ago and today, maybe 1,000 TEUs ship will stay for 5 days or something like that. And at the modern time that we're talking about, it's within 24 hours when the ship is out, or maybe less. What has made this possible is the TOS, the terminal operating system. And these systems must be incorporated. They are not only hedged to the port operations, they also must be hedged to empty container depot, to the customers. And I think specifically, like Mombasa, I've seen they have done a very good thing. They have come up with a single window system through country, which is a platform that every other individual that works in the maritime sector or handles cargo can go in and can track cargo and can get results. So technological advancements are there. Innovations, we are looking at places like in Hamburg. Recently, we heard that Musk have got a warehouse that is autonomous. It doesn't require human intervention. We are being told by 2040, the PSA, one of the ports, will be autonomous. So this is the way to go, and I think Africa should move with the one. And it's a good thing, like Mr. Mande said, it doesn't lose our job, but those who will adapt it fast will be the first in mover advantage. And I think I'm into it. Innovation is the key thing to go by.
Thank you very much for that. I think, again, collaboration is the key. And with regards to what you were saying about single window, I just wanted to know if our speakers know, because I think that was something that needs to be implemented by 2024. Do we have an indication of how many ports have implemented the single window and how many ports are still yet to implement the single window?
If I can start, most of the ports have started into it, but some are still lagging behind, unfortunately. And the issue is the integration. It's not yet integrated in many parts of the region, including with the border control. And there's lots of effort, even with some support of the Indian Ocean Commission, with some financing through Japan government, to be able to help the ports authorities to move faster with this development, so that everybody can communicate and talk together and clear the goods for import and export in a more efficient manner. But there's a bit of disparity right now, but there's lots of goodwill that is happening. And I believe in the next few years, though we are late, it will happen. Thank you.
I think if I may just add to what Colin said, or for precision, I just had a talk with one of the people who are doing that, and they were saying only 30% have done that. I think the report was early 2023, so we don't know where they are now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Manadir, do you have anything to add to that?
No, nothing to add to that.
Okay, thank you. And then just another question to pose. I think we have discussed the need for collaboration and therefore not being every port wanting to be the hub port in Africa. But in terms of looking into the future, which ports do you see really growing and maybe emerging as possible hub ports in Africa? Yes.
I believe there's also the factor of the green fuel evolution, the factors of those evolution in the size of shippings that is plying the region. And it remains to see now who will remain a hub or who will lose the position as a hub, because this will have a great influence on who will remain a hub and the development of feeder or cabotage in the region. Therefore, the two main factors is the characteristic of the ports to match the new shipping development, and also the green fuel development on the continent will influence the development of who remain a port and who will be relegated to maybe feeder port. Thank you.
I think just to add, you know, there's a question that they always pose. How big can a ship be? And this is commensurate to how big can a port be. We all know, like, for example, in the container business, by 2006, when Maersk Emma came in at 17,000 TEUs, we were thinking it's a massive and marvelous ship that we'll never see. And prior to that, the biggest ship in the world was 9,000 TEUs. And today, we are told that we have ships that are going up to 24,000 TEUs. So, like Colin said, some of these ships, they are ports that they cannot enter in Africa, including our own port Mombasa cannot accommodate this kind of a mega ship. So it will depend on how big can a port develop, and is it a natural harbor to develop? Like, for example, Lamu, it's a very prime candidate to become a hub, because it's a natural harbor, natural draft, and it's also connected to other countries that are landlocked and some that have got seaports. But I think the catch here is the physical infrastructure development of a port that will determine whether it will become a hub or a spoke. I think that's my take.
From my side, each region has its own hub already for container shipping. In North Africa, you have Tangier. In West Africa, there is Lome. In East Africa, there is Djibouti. South Africa, there's Durban, supposedly, or Nkoha. But which ports are going to develop quickly is going to depend on how serious the government is. It is a very subjective question. Everybody says they have the willpower or the political will to do this, but in action, it remains to be seen. For example, if we take South Africa, the new CEO of Transnet seems to be moving things in the right direction, but it remains to be seen how soon it will develop. Obviously, South Africa has also got its own challenges in terms of power and other issues which contribute to the lack of progress within the ports. So at the moment, these are the four areas where we are seeing some developments. As Elijah mentioned, Lamu has potential. Mozambique is also trying to position itself as as a potential leader in the Southern Africa region. So it remains to be seen how far the governments are willing to drive it, and whether it is with partnership with private companies or on its own. It remains a question.
And then with regards to the number of ports that we're seeing being developed in Africa, I was reading a PwC report and they were mentioning in Africa that we tend to want to build and react rather than build and plan and look into the future. But I mean, we have Port of Durban has 7 billion investment in Algeria, in Morocco, Angola, and I think DP World is also investing in Senegal. So how do you see this impacting? Do you see this negatively impacting us in the future or positively impacting us in the future, having so many ports being developed right at the same time? And what can be done if you see it as a negative effect?
I see it in one way as a sorry, one way it is.
Please go ahead.
One way it is a positive, because if these new ports that are being developed have the right equipment, have the right infrastructure, has the right mindset and the right operators, it could work in improving the efficiency of that country. So there could be more cargoes that could be routed in through those new ports, while the old ports are being revamped and restructured or things like that. But if those new ports are also going to follow the same principles or the same working methods of the older ports, then it's not going to help that country at all. It's just going to add to that, and the volumes will be split. It's not going to increase the volumes by any means, but increase in efficiency of the ports will definitely increase the volumes that can be generated out of any country, because the countries do have the economic potential, but in a lot of cases they're being hamstrung because of the ability to reach the markets, and that is what is going to make the difference here. Thank you.
Thanks.
If I may add on, I think in the future it will be like the battle of the fittest, because we have seen that many ship operators that had moved from one port or the other, or play one against the other to get the best concession possible. Therefore, like he pointed out, the efficiency may help you keep your client, and also the volume of trades in a particular country will be also one of the factors. But of course, from time to time, we will see that some will be falling behind, because there's only so much we can import and export. And even if we do value added, the volume may not increase considerably, because there are other factors that will impact on such development. But I believe that the challenge will remain with us. We need to relook at the investment and be smart and be sure that our investment, we will be able to sustain it and don't run into the risk of losing some of our ports to the financial institutions like we've seen in countries like Australia.
Thank you. And Mr. Elijah Mbaro, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to react to that. And, as we develop as an African country, as we develop our port, we have a competitive advantage. And we will be equal to those so-called developers. But my concern is you cannot only develop the port. You have to develop the port and the hinterland. I mean, anything that is connected to the port, like the road system and everything else, because the port is just a node of the economic driver. It's just a cluster. So the port alone being developed and we have a very poor connectivity, then it doesn't help. We will not have any competitive advantage. But it has to be a holistic development of the whole supply chain. That is my take. It's a good thing. But again, these developments that we are talking about, the government must, like Colonel said, they must be home funded as much as possible. Otherwise, if they are attached to loans, it will end up being a story like what we saw with Colombo, that the Chinese were taking their port, and such other very ugly scenario, which I don't think we are looking at going to that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's nearly 3:30. But I think I'll just allow the speakers, if they have any final remarks, if there's anything that you would like to add as final statements, please do.
I believe it's good to continue this conversation because we need a lot of work to be done to be able to develop our port and to ensure that we create awareness at all levels in the country, including the political level. There's some studies that are being carried out to see the impact of political interference in the development of ports, whether it is correct to continuously politically interfere in such an important asset of the country, or to develop capacities of our professionals to run the ports professionally without direct interference from the political level, to be sure that there's the right plan, the right target that the professionals need to achieve, and we will see progress. The issue of capacity building to the highest level will help us also to be able to perform on par as if we are a private sector. Thank you.
The common thread that has come out obviously is the political will of the various governments to carry out what is required to upgrade the ports, to update the ports, and not just the ports, the land and rail infrastructure, which are critical. I mean, Africa has very, very good potential. In fact, for the continent, we registered a surplus of 145% in 2022, and the increase in performance has been, or the GDP performance has been better than the global average as well already. So there is a lot of potential, but as I mentioned earlier, several countries and several initiatives are hamstrung because of what is happening in the ports or lack of development there, and it is mainly because of political will. So as long as that is taken care of, then Africa has a very good prospect in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elijah Mbaru.
Yeah, thank you so much. I must say that I'm honored and privileged to have been part of the great team of presenters and those who planned for this, plus the audience who are there. And my part in short is that as a continent, I think we are at infancy matters maritime, because we are told that the world shipping trade by 2022 was at 14 trillion US dollars. So it's a huge marketplace that we can play. And this is something that can alleviate poverty in most of our countries in Africa. So my thinking and my very strong conviction is that the ports must be handled in a very professional manner, void of political interference. That is where we are as a people, and I think that is the route that we should take, and I'm sure that we'll grow if we take that path. And thank you again, and I'm hoping that this discussion will not stop here. We will have another discussion, Mr. Unadi and team, but it won't stop here. And thank you very much, and good evening, good morning, depending on where you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you to our audience, and thank you for all the questions. I think it was very engaging, and thank you to the Maritime Business Chamber for this. I'll hand over to you, Onati. Thanks.
Once again, thank you to everyone who participated into today's discussion. Thank you to our moderator, Ms. Nongaba Bengu, for an excellent job in engaging us in today's conversation. Thank you to Colonel Sisu, Mr. Mbaru, and Mr. Manade for your insights around this conversation of today of ports as essential instruments for sustaining and improving, diverse growth in the African, economies. We understand that, the African ports, they continue to reflect more than just simple economic imperatives. And the ports are very crucial in creating and reinforcing, social, political, and cultural systems. So the infrastructure, the port infrastructure can really be useful, to lens and to understand particular groups and society value. And I think today's conversation took us, towards that direction. And indeed, on behalf of the Maritime Business Chamber, we are thankful, to all our speakers and everyone else who participated and attended, and all the questions that were raised today. We would continue these conversations. The Maritime 101 conversations, they continue. We try by all means, to theme them from month to month. But where there is an interest of a continuation of a conversation, we would obviously go back and see how do we then, take from where we had started with the previous conversation. So in those few words, and I know that we are over just by 5 minutes, I would like to thank each and every one of you for participating. May you have a blessed day.